Hey beautiful, have you considered subscribing to our channel? Help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers.
The crackling of the campfire was the only sound breaking the quiet stillness of the woods. The scent of pine and damp earth filled the air, grounding the group of friends in the peaceful solitude that only nature could provide. The moon, a sharp sliver in the dark sky, cast a gentle light over the campsite, illuminating their modest tents and the remnants of an earlier dinner. It had been a perfect day until she arrived. A screeching car pulled into the clearing, its tires grinding on gravel, shattering the tranquil atmosphere like glass. The engine roared to a stop, and the door flung open with a sudden, angry thud. The figure that emerged was unmistakable, a middle-aged woman, tall and sharply dressed, with her blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail, her face flushed with indignation. She stalked toward them, her eyes wide with a mix of fury and entitlement, as if she owned the very ground beneath their feet. "You're trespassing on my property," she yelled, her voice cutting through the quiet night like a blade. The group froze, each one looking at the other in confusion. "Excuse me?" The protagonist, Alex, stood up slowly, raising his hands in a gesture of calm. He had been camping in these woods for years, and as far as he knew, the land they were on was part of the public forest, open for anyone to enjoy. The rest of the group, 4 friends in total, sat silently watching the scene unfold. They all knew Alex was the level-headed one, the one who could handle confrontations like this. "You heard me. This is private land. I'm calling the cops, and you better pack up before they get here," the woman barked, her eyes narrowing as she moved closer, her boots crunching against the dry leaves. Alex felt a sudden surge of annoyance but held it back. "Ma'am, I think you're mistaken. This is public land. We've been coming here for years and we have every right to camp here," he said, trying to keep his voice even. The woman sneered at him, her lips curling into a thin, arrogant line. "Oh really? I don't think so. I've got the deeds right here. This is my property, and I don't take kindly to people like you using it without permission." Alex exchanged a glance with his friends. They all knew they were in the clear legally, but the woman wasn't interested in facts. Her tone was dismissive, as though she had already decided that she was in the right and that nothing Alex could say would change her mind. "Listen, we don't want any trouble," Alex continued, trying to keep things calm. "If you'll just look up the boundaries, you'll see that this is public land. We'll be gone by morning." But the woman wasn't listening. She was too wrapped up in her own sense of righteousness, too invested in the idea that this was her territory, and no one else had any claim to it. "You think I'm stupid?" she snapped. "I know the law better than you. Now pack up and leave or I'll make sure you regret it." Alex felt his patience start to thin. He could see the rest of his group growing uneasy. Daniel, the youngest of them, looked like he might explode with frustration at any moment. Meanwhile, Sarah and Chris were quietly observing, their eyes shifting back and forth between the woman and Alex, waiting for him to handle the situation. But there was something about this woman, something in her air of superiority, that set Alex's teeth on edge. He had dealt with arrogant people before, but there was a particular brand of entitlement here that grated against him. "You don't have the authority to tell us what to do," he said, his voice firm. He tried to stay calm, but it was becoming more difficult with each passing second. "If you have an issue with the land, we can go talk to the park rangers in the morning. But for now, we're not going anywhere." The woman took a step closer, her face reddening. "I will call the police and they'll deal with you. You're trespassing and I'm not letting you get away with it." Alex exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding anymore, it was a confrontation. The woman wasn't just misinformed, she was determined to assert her dominance. And the more he tried to reason with her, the more she dug in her heels. "What's your name?" Alex asked, trying to keep the situation from escalating further. He knew that people like her often didn't respond to logic, but maybe they would respond to authority. If he could get her to back down now, this whole thing could be avoided. "None of your business," she snapped. Alex's mind raced. There was no way they were leaving. Not when they were in the right. He glanced around, trying to figure out his next move, but before he could speak again, the woman pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen with practiced speed. "Don't worry, I'll make sure the cops know exactly what's going on here. They'll be here soon enough, and you'll be sorry you ever thought you could camp on my land," she muttered to herself, her voice low but filled with venom. Alex's frustration hit a boiling point. This wasn't just about camping anymore. This was about a woman who thought she could bully others simply because she believed she was above the law. It made his blood boil to think that someone could be so arrogant, so eager to exert control over people who hadn't done anything wrong. His friends were all watching him now, waiting for him to take charge of the situation. Alex felt the weight of their expectations, but more than that, he felt the injustice of it all. She was wrong, and yet she was the one acting like she had all the power. "All right," Alex said slowly, his voice filled with a calm determination. "Call the cops. We'll be here when they arrive. We're not going anywhere." The woman's smug grin grew wider. "You'll regret this, I promise you." As she turned to walk away, her phone still held up. Alex's heart was pounding in his chest. The night that had started so peacefully had taken a sharp, ugly turn. He could feel the tension crackling in the air around them. They weren't just fighting for their right to camp, they were fighting against someone who saw their rights as meaningless. The silence returned to the campsite, but it was a different kind of silence now, thick with the anticipation of the confrontation to come. The night air had grown colder, the peaceful sounds of the forest now drowned out by the heavy hum of tension. The group sat in silence around the fire, each of them lost in their thoughts. Alex couldn't shake the image of the woman's smug face, the way she'd stormed off with the certainty that she was right, leaving them in the middle of their campsite, uncertain of what was coming next. The fire crackled, sending occasional sparks into the air, but the warmth it provided felt hollow, almost mocking in its contrast to the simmering conflict that had just been ignited. "She can't just make stuff up," Daniel muttered, breaking the silence. His voice was tight, the frustration of the encounter still fresh in his words. He was the youngest of the group, a quick-witted college student who wasn't afraid to speak his mind. "She can't just tell us to leave when we're not doing anything wrong." Alex looked over at him, meeting Daniel's fiery gaze. "I know. But arguing with her isn't going to get us anywhere right now. We need to stay calm. Let her make her call, and when the cops get here, we'll explain the situation." Sarah, who had been quiet up until that point, gave a soft snort of disbelief. "Oh please. She won't listen to the cops. She's one of those people who thinks they can just throw their weight around because they think they're above everyone else." Chris, the most level-headed of the group, spoke next. His tone was calm, though there was a quiet anger simmering underneath. "We've dealt with people like this before. People who think they own the world, think they can control things because they're better than everyone else. It's always the same type." Alex nodded, his fingers drumming idly on the side of his chair. Chris was right. They'd all encountered people like Karen before, entitled, self-righteous individuals who thought they could impose their will on others without consequence. But this was different. They were in the woods, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. This wasn't some petty argument over parking spaces or small-town politics. This was about a place they cherished, a place they came to escape the world's noise, and now it felt like it was under siege. "So what now?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying the weight of the group's collective frustration. Alex glanced at the dark forest surrounding them. It felt unnerving now, like a looming presence, as if even the trees were watching the confrontation unfold. "We wait. We don't escalate things. If she's calling the cops, then we let them handle it." Chris frowned, shaking his head. "I still don't get it though. She can't be that ignorant. What if she's just trying to scare us off? What if she has a history of doing this?" The idea struck Alex like a spark. It was possible. Karen wasn't acting like someone who truly believed she had a claim to the land. She was acting like someone who was used to pushing people around, who thrived on intimidating others. The more he thought about it, the more the pieces started to fall into place. She hadn't come off as just ignorant, she had come off as someone who'd gotten away with this kind of behavior before. But he didn't have all the facts yet. "Before we do anything," Alex said, his voice steady, "let's make sure she's not bluffing. We need to find out who actually owns this land." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You think she's lying?" "I don't know yet," Alex replied. "But if she's lying, we can't let her get away with it. Not this time." The rest of the group agreed. Sarah, though still angry, seemed more at ease with the plan, and Chris gave a nod of approval. Daniel, eager for any opportunity to make the situation more interesting, was already reaching for his phone, no doubt to start digging into the property records. But it was Sarah who spoke next, her voice quiet, but edged with a mix of concern and curiosity. "But what if she's right? What if we are on her land?" The question hung in the air for a moment, and Alex felt a flicker of unease. They had all come to the woods to escape from their everyday lives, to enjoy something simple and natural. It was hard to believe that something so petty could ruin it all. But Sarah's question was valid. What if they were in the wrong? "I'll check the maps again," Chris said, pulling his phone out. "We've camped here enough times to know the boundaries, but it doesn't hurt to double-check." Alex nodded and stood up, stretching his arms above his head. The firelight flickered across his face, casting long shadows that seemed to dance on the trees surrounding them. As he walked to the edge of the campsite, he caught sight of Karen's car still parked at the clearing's edge. The headlights were dim, but the silhouette of the vehicle remained, a stark reminder of the altercation that had just taken place. It wasn't just the land that felt threatened now, it was the principle of the matter. Alex had grown up with a strong sense of fairness. He hated bullies, hated seeing people like Karen walk around assuming they could dictate what others could or couldn't do. And that's exactly what she was, a bully. Turning back to the group, Alex's mind started working through a plan. They needed information, something concrete to expose Karen's bluff. He wouldn't back down without proving she was wrong, but he couldn't afford to make a rash move that would backfire. "Okay," Alex said, his voice resolute. "We need to make sure she's not just making this up. Let's double-check the records, the property lines, everything we can. If she's lying, we take her down with the truth. If we're wrong, we pack up and leave, no questions asked." The group fell silent, each of them processing the plan. For a moment, the forest felt even quieter than before, as though it was holding its breath. There was no immediate rush to action. They knew what they had to do, and now it was just a matter of waiting for the right moment. But the longer they sat, the more Alex could feel the weight of what was at stake. This wasn't just about camping anymore. It was about standing up to injustice, about making sure that someone like Karen wouldn't get away with her behavior, not on his watch. The calm before the storm was palpable, and Alex knew they were about to take the first step in turning the tables. Somehow he knew this wasn't going to be as simple as it seemed. The moon had risen higher in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the campsite. The air was thick with tension, but beneath it, there was an undercurrent of determination. The group huddled together, their phones in hand, each absorbed in researching the land ownership, poring over maps and property records. The fire crackled as the occasional wind rustled the leaves, but the peaceful sounds of the forest seemed far removed from the battle brewing just beyond their campsite. Alex's mind raced as he flicked through online maps, comparing them with the vague directions Karen had rattled off earlier. He could feel his frustration building. Everything he'd read pointed to the land being part of a national forest reserve, public land, open to anyone who wanted to camp. There was no sign of private ownership here, no indication that anyone, much less some self-proclaimed landowner, had a legitimate claim. Daniel was pacing back and forth, muttering under his breath about how ridiculous this whole thing was. "If she's really going to call the cops over this," he said, stopping to shoot Alex a glance, "I swear I'll—" "Calm down, Dan," Alex interrupted, keeping his tone measured. "We need to focus. The last thing we need is to get caught up in a shouting match with her again. Just stay cool." Daniel let out an exaggerated sigh but nodded, knowing Alex was right. If there was one thing that could escalate a situation faster than anything, it was the kind of hot-headed reaction Daniel often had when things didn't go his way. Still, Alex could feel the pulse of anxiety that matched his own. This woman was not going to back down without a fight. Sarah leaned over to Chris, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you really think she's bluffing?" she asked, her brow furrowed. Chris, eyes still glued to his phone, didn't look up. "I don't know. But people like her don't usually just bluff. They play the game, push the boundaries. I wouldn't be surprised if she's done this to other campers before. Probably gotten away with it too." The words stung. It wasn't just about the land anymore, it was about the kind of person Karen was. A person who assumed they could impose their will, ruin someone else's experience, and walk away without consequence. And if she had done this before, how many others had been driven out of their peaceful getaways by her brand of entitlement? Alex exhaled slowly, the weight of it settling on him. "We're not just going to roll over for her," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. He pulled up the local government website, his fingers moving quickly over the screen as he searched for any mention of private ownership in the area. Meanwhile, Daniel was still pacing, his frustration becoming more apparent with each step. Why is she even out here? People like that don't camp. She's got nothing better to do than harass people who just want to enjoy the woods. It was a good question and one that Alex couldn't quite answer. But there was a deeper concern gnawing at him. If Karen had done this before, there was a chance that she had some form of backing, whether it was a legal loophole, an obscure ownership clause, or some other technicality that could give her power in a way that didn't make sense to them. What if they were wrong? What if, despite all evidence to the contrary, she had found a way to lay claim to something that was meant to be public? "I think it's time we confront her again," Chris said, snapping Alex out of his thoughts. Chris's expression was serious now. He wasn't just talking about a quick chat, he was talking about something far more direct. Alex nodded, standing up slowly. "I agree. We need to make sure she's not hiding something. If she's bluffing, we need to call her on it. But we have to be smart. Let's not give her any ammo to turn things against us. They all stood in silence for a beat, their eyes flicking toward the still-shadowed figure of Karen's car. The woman had been gone for what felt like hours, but she'd left her presence lingering in the air like smoke. Sarah broke the silence with a quiet question. Do you think she's really going to call the cops, though? She's acting like she has the power to do whatever she wants, but does she really? Alex thought about it for a moment. She might. But that's exactly why we need to stick to the facts. We know we're in the right. The cops can't take her word over ours if we have proof. And once we have it, it's game over for her. Chris gave a slow nod, his mind already shifting gears. Okay then. Let's go. It's now or never. The group moved as one, their steps hesitant but determined. Alex led the way toward Karen's car, the faint sound of their footsteps swallowed by the dense woods around them. The trees loomed like silent witnesses, their branches heavy with the weight of the night. The campsite, once a place of camaraderie and laughter, now felt like a battleground. As they approached her car, Alex's heart thudded in his chest. He couldn't help but feel a surge of anger at the idea of someone coming in, trying to take control of their space. This was supposed to be their escape. It had always been a sanctuary for them, a place to reconnect with the quiet of nature, to leave behind the chaos of everyday life. They stopped a few feet away from the car, unsure of what to expect. Alex turned to face the group. Stay sharp. Don't let her twist anything. We stand firm, stick to the facts, and we don't let her get under our skin. Daniel was the first to speak up, his voice brimming with tension. Let's just get this over with. Alex nodded, stepping forward with a calmness he didn't entirely feel. They reached the car, and just as he was about to knock on the window, Karen's voice suddenly rang out, sharp and cutting. You're still here? She demanded, stepping out of the shadows like a figure out of a nightmare. She had a self-satisfied smirk on her face, as though she already knew she had the upper hand. I told you, Alex began, forcing his voice to remain steady, we've done our research. This is public land. You're mistaken and we're not going anywhere. Karen's eyes narrowed, her smile twisting into something more dangerous. You really think you can just ignore me and walk away from this? You don't know who you're dealing with. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And he knew without a doubt that the real battle was only just beginning. The air between them crackled, thick with the tension of impending confrontation. Karen's smirk never wavered, but the sharpness in her eyes betrayed the irritation bubbling beneath her calm exterior. Alex held his ground, his chest tightening as he fought to keep his voice steady. You're wrong, Karen. This isn't your land. We've already checked. We know what the property lines are. His words were calm but firm, meant to make her pause, to force her to face the truth that was coming for her. But Karen didn't flinch. Instead, she took a step closer, closing the space between them. The forest seemed to grow even quieter, as though holding its breath. She didn't look like someone who had just lost the battle. She looked like someone who was used to winning, who was used to bending others to her will. You think a few maps are going to stop me? She spat, her voice dripping with disdain. You don't know who I am, what I've done here. I've been coming to these woods long before you all decided to ruin it with your campfires and noise. Sarah stepped forward, her patience long gone. What is it with people like you? Why do you think you have the right to just walk over anyone who doesn't agree with you? Karen's gaze flicked over Sarah, dismissive, as if she were little more than a nuisance. Because I've got the money and connections to make people listen. Something you obviously don't have. She paused, taking a step back, her posture shifting to one of superiority. I can have you removed, you know. You think the police will side with you? They'll see a bunch of entitled campers who think the world belongs to them. Alex's fingers clenched into fists at his sides, but he forced himself to remain calm. There was no use in feeding her fire. He needed to win this the right way. We're not going anywhere, he said again, this time more resolute. And we're not scared of you. The silence that followed was deafening. It hung between them, charged with the weight of Karen's arrogance and Alex's determination. And then, almost as if the universe had finally decided to intervene, a distant siren wailed through the trees. Karen's expression flickered, only for a moment. But it was enough for Alex to catch it, the brief flash of uncertainty before she regained her composure. She straightened, her eyes narrowing, but her smugness was no longer as assured. Well, it seems you'll get your way for now, she said, her voice thick with resentment. But don't think this is over. You've made a mistake you'll regret. With that, she turned and marched toward her car, leaving the group behind, her heels clicking sharply on the forest floor. Alex watched her retreat, every part of him wanting to chase her down, to expose her for the fraud she was. But something stopped him, an instinct telling him that the next step was just as important, if not more so. "You think she's bluffing about the cops?" Daniel asked, his voice low. "I don't think so," Alex replied, his mind already racing. "But she's not going to intimidate us. We'll stand our ground. And we'll make sure she knows we've got the truth on our side." Before anyone could respond, a patrol car pulled into the clearing, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The officer behind the wheel was a middle-aged man, his face lined with years of experience in dealing with all sorts of disputes. He parked the car and got out slowly, his eyes scanning the group before landing on Karen, who had already turned back around to face him. Alex's heart pounded in his chest, but his resolve remained firm. The cop looked from Karen to the group, and for a moment, everything seemed to slow down. The air felt even heavier now, the weight of the situation pressing down on everyone. "Ma'am," the officer said, his tone neutral. "What's going on here?" Karen was quick to respond, her voice smooth and practiced. "These campers are on my land. I've asked them to leave, but they're refusing. I want them removed immediately." The officer's gaze shifted to Alex, then to the others. Alex met his eyes directly, holding his breath. "Is that true?" the officer asked, his voice calm but with an edge of suspicion. "No, sir," Alex said, stepping forward. "We've done our research. This land is public, part of the national forest. We've been camping here for years and we've never had an issue." Karen's face darkened, but she quickly regained her composure, her smile returning like a mask. "That's a lie. I've been coming here for years. I know the area better than anyone. This is my property and I won't tolerate trespassers." Alex shook his head, the weight of her lies beginning to suffocate him. "We've already checked the property records. It's public. You don't own it." The officer glanced between them, clearly uncertain. He wasn't willing to jump to conclusions yet, but it was obvious he was considering both sides. The stillness of the night seemed to press closer, the sound of crickets and rustling leaves growing louder in the silence. "Let me take a look at the maps," the officer said, pulling out his phone. He gave a quick glance at Karen before turning his full attention to Alex. "If what you're saying checks out, I'm going to need her to leave. If not, you'll have to pack up and go." Alex's heart raced as he watched the officer's fingers move swiftly over his phone screen, pulling up the same maps that they had studied earlier. The silence stretched on, the tension in the air almost unbearable. And then, finally, the officer looked up. "I'm afraid she's wrong," he said, his voice steady but firm. "This is public land. She's mistaken. You're free to stay." The satisfaction that surged through Alex was almost overwhelming. He turned to Karen, whose face had gone pale, her composure shattered. The anger in her eyes burned like a fire that would never go out. But the battle was over. The truth had won. Karen's lips twisted into a grimace. "You haven't heard the last of this," she said, her voice barely a whisper, a thin thread of rage running through the words. Without another word, she stormed back to her car, her heels clicking louder with each step, retreating into the darkness. The officer gave her one last glance, then turned back to the group, his expression neutral. "You're free to go," he said, a slight nod of acknowledgement in his eyes. "Have a good night." As the officer got into his car and drove off, Alex couldn't help but feel a surge of triumph. They had stood their ground not just because they were right, but because they had refused to be intimidated. They had called out the bully and now it was over. The fire flickered in the distance, its glow warm against the cool night air. The forest had fallen back into its peaceful rhythm, the sounds of the wild reclaiming their place in the silence. And as Alex looked around at his friends, Sarah, Chris, Daniel, he realized something important. It wasn't just about camping. It was about standing up for what was right, even when the odds seemed stacked against them. They had won, and the victory felt sweeter than anything they had anticipated. As the group sat back down, a sense of calm settled over them. Alex couldn't help but smile. It wasn't just that they'd won, it was that they had done it together. And somehow that made all the difference.